Hello, I'm Jordan. In this video, I'll show you how to increase vodka's alcohol by volume so you can use it to sanitize surfaces, objects, or your hands. Now, it's well known that you can make hand sanitizer with isopropyl alcohol, and that's great. I'm not here to claim that working with vodka is easier or more effective. I'm here to provide another option to people who don't have access to isopropyl. Now, according to the Center for Disease Control website, ethanol alcohol, the kind found in vodka, can be used as hand sanitizer, but must be at least 60% alcohol by volume before it's able to kill the majority of viruses, including coronaviruses. Vodka is typically 80 proof, which means 40% alcohol. Our goal is to get that number up to around 70% alcohol, so we can then dilute it with other ingredients to make hand sanitizer and still meet the CDC's requirement of 60%. I got this idea from a YouTube video, in which table salt was added to isopropyl alcohol so that it would bind to the water molecules and separate them from the isopropyl, creating a distinct separation line and allowing easy removal of the alcohol by siphoning it off the top. This was quite a sight to behold, and since I didn't have access to isopropyl, I figured I could just use vodka instead. However, I quickly learned that ethanol doesn't react the same way to table salt. The experiment failed miserably, and then began my quest to find another type of solute that would help separate water from ethanol. So, I tried TSP, or trisodium phosphate, which I had picked up at the local hardware store, but it didn't work. I also tried molecular sieves, and they really seemed like they were going to work. The mason jar got warm to the touch and bubbles started to form. Unfortunately, they simply didn't absorb enough water, and the alcohol concentration only increased by about 10%. I think that molecular sieves still have the potential to work, and I don't want to discredit them as a possibility in the future. However, that's not what this tutorial is about. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. Starting with a materials list, you'll need the following items. Number 1, a bottle of the cheapest vodka you can find. This is $12 Costco vodka and it does the trick just fine. No need to get fancy here. Number 2, potassium carbonate. Number 3, a hydrometer or refractometer. Both have their own pros and cons, which for the sake of time I won't discuss right now. Either way, it should be capable of measuring high alcohol percentages. Get one designed for spirits, not wine and beer. Number 4, if you went with a hydrometer, as opposed to going with a refractometer, if you went with a hydrometer, you'll also need some sort of tall, skinny beaker to help hold the vodka you're measuring. Number 5, some sort of turkey baster or tube-based suction system to siphon the concentrated alcohol with. Number 6, a jar with a lid to put your vodka in, because the separation process might get a bit hot and you don't want any alcohol to evaporate. Mason jars work well for this. Number 7, vegetable glycerin to increase your hand sanitizer's viscosity, which will keep it from immediately evaporating off of your hands. Number 8, optional, a pleasant perfume or essential oil of your choosing. This is just for the smell. Okay, so now that you've got your materials, you're ready to start the process. First, measure out 120 grams of your potassium chloride. If you don't happen to have a gram scale, just use 130 milliliters. Translated to the imperial system, that's around 3.7 to 3.8 cubic cheeseburgers. Next, pour 16 ounces of vodka into your mason jar, or whatever jar you're using. Then, pour your potassium chloride into the jar full of vodka, set it down, and watch the magic happen. Simple as that. Within about a minute, you should see a separation line begin to develop. Below the line is water, and above the line is concentrated ethanol alcohol. The whole process should last around 5 minutes. To harness your vodka's maximum potential, feel free to leave it for a tiny bit longer. Anything over 10 minutes would be redundant though. So once everything's settled, grab your turkey baster and siphon off as much concentrated ethanol as you can. Be sure not to accidentally take up any liquid from below the separation line though. It's salt water. Now that you've extracted your ethanol, it's time to test the concentration. Earlier, I mentioned that both hydrometers and refractometers are viable, but that they each have pros and cons. I'll touch on that now. So, hydrometers utilize buoyancy to give a reading of what they're floating in, and refractometers use refractions of light. Hydrometers are capable of providing a complete range of measurements, from 0 to 100%, whereas most refractometers only go up to 80. Hydrometers are also cheaper than refractometers, coming in at around $8 to $15 as opposed to $20 to $25. But in my opinion, refractometers are still a better choice for this specific task. You see, potassium carbonate is salt, and salt increases the buoyancy potential of any liquid it's dissolved within. This will cause inaccuracies if you use a hydrometer, but not a refractometer, since hydrometers are buoyancy based. Also, refractometers only need one drop of sample in order to produce a reading. Hydrometers need an entire beaker full, enough liquid to float in. To measure my concentration, I'm going to use both a hydrometer and a refractometer because I have both, but if you're following along, the choice is yours. Here they are. Both are reading 80%, but my guess is that it's probably a bit higher. The hydrometer is most likely being thrown off by the sheer amount of salt within the ethanol, and the refractometer only goes up to 80%. I guess I'll never know exactly how high the alcohol percentage is, but I do know it's more than enough to sanitize your hands and kill coronavirus. Little side note here, if you don't have a hydrometer or refractometer, you could try turning the lights out and lighting a small portion of the concentrated ethanol on fire. If it burns higher than the original vodka does, then you know the concentration was successful, to some degree. A little warning, do not try this with the lights on, because you will not be able to see the ethanol-based flame and you'll probably end up burning yourself. Anyway, back to the process. At this point, you should find a way to get your concentrated ethanol into some sort of squirty bottle or small jar. Just make sure it has a lid. Now, add a few drops of the vegetable glycerin. As I said earlier, this will increase the viscosity of your hand sanitizer and keep it from immediately evaporating off of your hands. Don't add quite as much as I added in this clip though, it made my mixture a bit too thick. After that, top your concoction off with an essential oil or perfume of your choosing. This is optional though, it's just to make it smell nice. And now, you're done. You've just created an effective hand sanitizer out of vodka, and if you were curious, yeah, it is still drinkable. I wouldn't advise you try, because it's gonna taste salty and unpleasant, but whatever floats your boat, or whatever floats your hydrometer.